Welcome to the April 28th meeting of the Danvers Cable Advisory Committee. Before we get into it, tonight's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have our regularly scheduled meeting first, and then at approximately 6 o'clock we'll be starting with the public open forum on the renewal of the license. So regular conducted meeting first, and then we'll close that meeting and get into the public forum. So first of all, I'd like to review the update from the attorneys. Is Bill here?
Bill just joined us.
Okay. Oh, he's on the screen.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to see if Casper the Ghost walked in.
Right?
See you there.
Okay.
He's virtual.
Okay. Hi, Bill. Thank you. Could you give us a comment on the latest from the council viewpoint?
Bill, you have 1 minute. We're just having some audio connection issues. Don't be sorry.
What is the audio go through? Is the audio just down on here?
Maybe he's on. He might have his on silent.
Yeah, I got you now, Bill.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay. We face the dilemma you sometimes see with two licenses, and that is that the two licenses are not coterminous. In our case, they're about 3 years apart, and in our negotiations with Comcast, or at least in my discussions with Comcast, it's become clear that Comcast is not willing to give us a 10-year license with the amount of capital and the amount of operating expenses that we want over the 10-year period, which would meet our future ascertainment goals. That amount was 5% gross annual revenues and 649,000 capital over 10 years. So that's 64,900 a year. They're not willing to do that, and they say they won't do it because Verizon is not obligated to provide that kind of, to meet that kind of requirement. As a result, we conferred and deliberated about a month or a half ago back and decided that the way to do this would probably, the best way to do this would probably be to have a 3-year license, to grant a 3-year license to Comcast under the current terms, and then when both licenses are up for renewal, Verizon and Comcast, in 2 to 3 years, renegotiate both of them for the higher amounts we're looking for. That's possible when you're not fighting a level playing field, tit-for-tat battle between two cable companies, one of which is a license that's 3 years away from renewal, and the other one that's up for renewal. The Cable Committee, I think, was in general agreement with that suggested strategy. So I posed it to Comcast, and I said, look, we'd just like to have a 3-year license for the current amount of money we get now, which is 3% and $39,800 a year. That's what we currently get. And we'd like to do that for 3 years, and that'll give us a chance to negotiate with both Comcast and Verizon at the same time to get the higher levels of funding we're looking for. Well, I've done this in the past, and it's never been a problem, but of course cable negotiations and cable companies and the cable area in general is constantly in flux. And Comcast said, no, we don't do 3-year licenses like that anymore. And I said, well, my opinion is that all we have to do is have the board sign a 3-year license for the current amounts of money, the 3% and the $39,800 a year, which you currently get, and just send it to you. And you can't say no. And the reason for that is that if a cable company doesn't like what's being offered, they go into court and they sue and they get an injunction from the federal court, and the injunction simply advances the current license under the current terms until you get a negotiated renewal. And I said to them, look, that's what's going to happen. And they said, so Greg Franks, the guy I was talking to, said, go talk to Jerry Buckley, my boss. I went to talk to Jerry Buckley, whom I've known for years, and Jerry said the same thing. We really don't like doing 3-year licenses anymore. Here's what we propose. We propose a 10-year license. The first 3 years will be the same as what you've got now. And then we'll negotiate now for the further terms in 3 years, and we'll see if we can get a deal that way. So that's our current status. I have not gone back and renegotiated anything further. We are at a kind of a standstill. And what I don't know is whether Comcast would even agree after 3 years to give us 5% and $64,900 a year. I don't know that. It's possible they will, possible they won't. In any event, I sent an email to the Cable Committee on April 8th, setting forth all of these facts and all of this information. And that's where we are now. We are at an equipoise, if you will. We're at a standstill with Comcast negotiations. I think our next step is to try to negotiate that 10-year license, getting what we currently have now for 3 years, and then getting the renewal numbers after year 3, and see if we can get it. And if we can't get that, my recommendation will be that we recommend to the board that you sign a 3-year license with exactly the same terms we have now and just mail it to Comcast. They can't say no. And that is my report.
So help me understand from my point of view, Bill, and you've been at this a lot longer than I have. I guess when I look at this picture, I think it's a privilege for them to be able to have a license with our town. And I'm a little bit taken back that they're kind of driving the behavior and we're not asking for anything extraordinary. Why are we getting treated this way when they have a $50 million account in town?
I couldn't agree with you more. It is a privilege to have a license from us. It's a license to make money in our town. And all I can tell you is that the world of cable TV licensing is just getting leaner and meaner. Cable companies are becoming less cooperative. They're becoming less willing to give large amounts of money, less willing to negotiate terms we used to be able to get before, like a 3-year license. And I attribute this to a fear that the cable industry is a sunset industry, that people are cutting the cord, that they're not going to be around, they're not going to be making the kinds of profits they make, and so they have to be lean and mean on a going forward basis. That's my assumption. I particularly have noticed that with Verizon. Haven't particularly noticed it with Comcast until now. But as I say, the world is changing, and that's the only explanation I can possibly offer for you. It is a negotiation process. They do have to meet us. They do have to negotiate with us. If we can't come to a deal, we can always say no and end up in court, but we don't want to do that. The alternative to doing a deal is a very, very expensive one. So unfortunately for us, we're at the disadvantage of having the only real option available to us, that is denying the license, the only option that would really move them, being a very expensive and unattractive option.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I guess, if I were to think from the consumer point of view in a contractual agreement, what's in our option space? If we tell them to walk, does Verizon become our only carrier in town, and do we end up with a citizenship that's really upset at us? Or is there enough pain in the system by us doing this that Comcast loses a $50 million account?
Well, I don't think they would lose a $50 million account. As I said, let's assume hypothetically, we say, Comcast, you're not meeting our needs. We are going to say no. We're going to deny your license. What will happen? What happens is, I've been through this before, but fortunately not very often, a couple times. What happens is Comcast sues the town in federal court, and they seek an injunction or a temporary restraining order that restrains the issuing authority from denying the license and orders the issuing authority and Comcast to proceed with the currently effective license. And, excuse me just a moment. Sorry, my cell phone was ringing. So you end up in court, and there's a court order that the current license continues to be in full force and effect until the parties can negotiate a new license, and the court orders us to go away and negotiate and come back and report to them. So there's a fair amount of legal expenses involved with that sort of thing. And where do we end up? We end up where we are now, trying to negotiate a new license. So the options that we have, the legal options that we have exist, but they are completely unattractive and way too expensive for us to pull the trigger on them. That leaves us with, the right and the power to negotiate and to try and strike the best deal we can. And as I said earlier, my final drop-dead option to Comcast, if we can't negotiate something better, would be to recommend that the issuing authority, the board, simply prepares and signs a 3-year license with exactly the same terms that we have now, and just send it to Comcast and say, there's your license, sign it. Comcast will not say no, I don't think, because, as I said, when you go into court, if they sue us and go into court, that's what the court's going to do. They're going to order that license to be the baseline for negotiations. So Comcast's efforts to talk us down from having the same license terms in effect for 3 years, having a 3-year license term, the same effects, are not going to work. But our better option is to see what kind of a deal we can get with them. And then, I can negotiate, your cable advisors can negotiate, cable advisory team can negotiate. We'll see what we can get and come back and report to you what the best possible option is. And at this point, I can't tell you what that is. I'm not sure how far Comcast will want to go.
So how about, I'm not a contract lawyer, but if we had a contract with them and the contract expires, how are we legally bound to have to go negotiate with them? Can't we just let that contract expire and say bye to them and then entertain the thought of another provider in town?
Well, the answer is, if we do let the if we let the contract expire without continuing to negotiate, one of two things will happen. Comcast will go into court and sue us and get a court order to continue the license and order us back to the negotiating table. Or two, Comcast will say, okay, we're pulling the cord, we're pulling the plug, no TV for everybody who's got a Comcast, everybody who's a Comcast subscriber. That is an unattractive, completely unattractive option, I would think.
Excuse me for a second, why would they sue us? On what basis do they have grounds to sue us if the contract expired and we're not happy with the terms that they're putting forth to us?
Well, the bases for us saying no are fairly limited. And what it means, the way the Cable Act is written, is that the cable company has a presumptive right to renewal unless we can show one of two things. A, they're in violation of their current license, or B, they're not meeting our future community cable-related needs. Those are the only two lawful bases we would have for saying no and not renewing their license. Now, the first one, not complying with the current license, we don't have any evidence that that is the case. That may be the case, but we have no such evidence, and I doubt very much we will find it, because mostly that means a poor signal quality or poor customer service, and most of the time Comcast has corrected the problems we've had in the past, and we don't have a lot of those complaints anymore. That means that the only legally sufficient basis we would have to say no to a license and not issue it would be that they don't meet our future community cable-related needs. That is a matter of opinion by both us and Comcast. And if Comcast wants to continue to have a license in Danvers, if we said no on that basis, they would sue us and take us into federal court, as I say, and get a court order to continue the license, notwithstanding the fact that we said no. So we end up in court, either way, in all likelihood. Even if, excuse me just a second.
How many years did we do with Verizon? How many years did we, what did we end up doing with Verizon?
We did a 10, I guess.
5, right?
I thought we did.
My apologies. Phone's ringing everywhere. Anyway, what I was, let me just conclude my thought. Even if Comcast left town and decided they don't want to be a provider of cable service in Danvers anymore, it's highly unlikely we're going to get anybody else, because there isn't anybody else out there who would come except for Verizon. RCN, the only other candidate, is not expanding into new communities and hasn't done so in a long, long time. And there's nobody else out there who would come. So we would end up with one instead of two cable providers in town.
Yeah, it just gets interesting to me that our hands are kind of tied in terms of force in their hand, but, I doubt that they would ever do it, but the fact that they can get up and go out of town and leave us hanging is kind of interesting, where, we have to commit to them until we prove something drastically wrong, which probably isn't going to happen, so.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go start my own cable business, but, all right.
They can't actually leave us, although Verizon has started to insist that type of provision be written into their licenses. But Comcast could not leave, could not just walk up, decide in the middle of a license that they were going to terminate.
Okay.
They don't have that power. So if they try to do that, we do have the legal right to force them to stay in town under the terms of their license.
Okay, I've asked a lot of questions. I'll defer to my fellow board members for any questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Bill, let me ask you, if the current contract is not expired, they can provide they would continue to provide the service until we re-sign. What if we just did nothing? What happens then?
If we do nothing and the license expires, the usual presumption is, the usual legal presumption is that as long as the parties are negotiating in good faith for a renewal, the currently existing terms stay in full force and effect. In other words, the license survives after termination if we're trying in good faith to negotiate a renewal license.
Have you considered that possibility of recommending to us to just let it expire until the 3 years that we go and, is there any advantage to that?
No, I don't believe there is, unless we are negotiating in good faith. The problem with just letting it expire and doing nothing is that it is a violation of FCC and state cable law for a cable company to provide a license or to provide cable service without a currently effective license in place. Now, all the legal bodies make an exception for that if you're trying to renew the license and you're negotiating in good faith. But if you're not doing that, then sooner or later, one of two things is going to happen. The cable company will start to get scared and they'll go into court. As I've been saying, that's their option. The other thing that could possibly happen is the FCC could step in and say, all right, Comcast, you don't have a license, shut down immediately. So both options to letting the license terminate without trying to negotiate in good faith for a renewal, both options to that are really, as far as I'm concerned, unattractive.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, any questions?
I'm good.
Everybody's good? Okay.
I think Greg has something. Is that Greg over there? I can't see that far.
I have a question, but is this the appropriate time?
Go right ahead.
I'm going to go live.
Okay.
Thank you. I guess the question I have is with the business plan and the community needs that were assessed during this process for cable in Danvers. I believe at the last meeting, the committee came to the conclusion that to meet the full cable needs for Danvers, we would need 4% and 15% increase in capital. I would just say that 3% will not be sufficient to even maintain the current level of service that you're seeing now. That any continuance at 3% would effectively be a reduction in the quality of service to the town of Danvers. And I do think that given what we've been doing over the past few years, particularly during the pandemic, I think it would be a pain point for the town. And I do think the town would be negatively impacted by just renewing the current license. If the goal is to meet the full needs for the citizens of Danvers, as far as cable goes, I do think that 4% would be necessary to do so. And to go to 3% would involve a reduction in service for the town. So I don't know if there's a question there, if that's just a comment, but I guess the question would be, did we open it 4% and was that just a complete non-starter? I know that in the Verizon license, there is a trigger that if the franchise fee percentage goes up on the Comcast license, or that they would match. So there wouldn't be a level playing field issue regardless of the fact that the contracts are not coterminous. So my understanding during the last contract cycle was the purpose of getting that clause would be so there could potentially, if the town wanted to, have an increase in the franchise fee percentage during the Comcast license. And I guess I'm wondering where that stands. You know, I don't see the level playing field issue being a particularly big factor given that clause in the Verizon contract. So Bill, I don't know if that's a question for you as far as where that would stand and what the possibility of that would be. But I did just want to make that clear, that there could potentially be a reduction in service for the town under this proposed license. Thank you.
I can respond, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
Yeah. Please, Bill, I defer to you. Thank you.
Yes, the 3% is only part of what we're looking for, and indeed there is a triggering mechanism in the Verizon license that says if the other cable company gives agrees to a higher percentage, we'll match that. But the other part of it is capital, and we're wanting to go from 39,000 a year to 64,000 a year. That's a sizable jump. And I understand that we have established in ascertainment that what our needs are, and we've got legitimate but quite expensive needs. The purpose of the strategy we adopted was to divide the capital needs between the two carriers at the time that their licenses are up for renewal. So it might be easy enough for us to say to Comcast, all right, Comcast, just give us 5%, so Verizon will go up to 5%, but we don't have the luxury of saying the same sort of thing for the corresponding amounts of capital. Verizon is not going to match that capital. If we get Comcast to go up to 694 or whatever, 694, 695, Verizon's not going to match it, and Comcast won't go up if Verizon doesn't match it. So that's the dilemma we're in. And it seems like the only way to get around that is at least to put ourselves in the best possible holding pattern we can for 3 years till we get the two licenses together, and then we can take them both by the collar and say, all right, up to 5% and give us more capital. We've shown it, we need it. And if we've got the two of them there together and we can agree to increases on both of them that will not offend their level playing field concerns, that seems to me to be the only path for success, quite frankly, in the circumstances we find ourselves.
Yeah, and I think as long as I've been on the board, I think that's been our intent here, is to get the two of them aligned. And I think it's a little bit of a problem for me to deviate from that strategy right now, because that's the way the board has voted, and that's been our intent for quite a while, is to get them aligned.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it's short-term pain for long-term gain, because if we do get to the alignment point, they'll both be giving us the same amount of capital and franchise fees or whatever as you call it.
Yeah.
In the guise of negotiating, why couldn't we send a contract to them and request the 4%? And that's part of our negotiating. And although I guess you're telling me they've already refused that.
They have refused it. The problem is, if we agree to 4%, now they're going to say, okay, we'll give you 4% for 10 years. And that's not going to help us in the long run. What we're really looking for is 5% from both of them. So it's entirely hypothetical. I don't know what they would say to 4% over 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. But I think that we are not going to meet our goal unless we can either get a 3-year license at the level terms that we have now, level funded as per now, and then go up, or else, unless we, as Comcast has suggested, discuss a 10-year license under which the first 3 years are level funded now, and then we can establish that we'll get a lot more in year 4 and attempt to negotiate. Those seem to be the two options that make the most sense.
And the reason that you would do a 3-year negotiation versus a 10-year, what if we went for 10 years right now with them at 4 or 5%? We'll give them the 10 years, but we go for it. And as far as the coordinating the 2 terms, it's a goal, but I don't think it's, something that we're married to forever. What about the option of going and negotiating a 10-year deal with them for what we need, which is the 5% or 4% and some type of increase in the capital? I mean, I'd like to talk about what those 2 terms being identical. Again, Bill, refresh my memory, the advantage of those 2 terms being the same?
The advantage is that both licenses have a level playing field provision in them that says we won't give you anything more than the other one's giving you. So it makes it extremely difficult when the licenses aren't in lockstep, because we're trying to increase our capital and our annual revenues right now from Comcast, but Verizon's got a license that was issued years ago and it's lower. So Comcast is saying, we won't do that. We won't give you 5% and $695,000 until you make Verizon do the same. So that's where the 3-year delay comes in. It seems like that's the only, we've already asked Comcast to give us 5% and $395,000 now. The answer is no. That puts us at a competitive disadvantage. You're making us pay a lot more than Verizon. We pass those costs through. Comcast subscribers pay more. They leave, they go to Verizon, or they leave and just never come back, and we lose business. So we won't do it. We will consider doing it if both of them are being negotiated at the same time and the level playing field concerns can be met.
All right,
for both of them.
that's
So
fine.
That's the problem.
Bill, let me ask you, that being said, first of all, wasn't it 4%?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that
You
clarifying
keep saying
question.
5. The committee, we talked 4. We've never talked 5. So, and let me ask you this, if we went and negotiated a deal with Comcast for 4% for 10 years, isn't the same kickback come that Verizon has to meet that?
Yes, Verizon would. But the question is, the question is the capital. One of the most important parts of our renewal of our ascertainment assessment was what we need for capital costs over the next 10 years. And the amount that we needed was a large amount, something like $800,000 or $900,000, and we decided we can only possibly achieve that by dividing it between the 2 carriers. And so the amount that was attributable to Comcast is $694,000. So we could negotiate a license with Comcast for 4%, but I don't think that right now, and Verizon would go up, but what I'm saying is Verizon would not be obligated to match the $694,000 in capital, and therefore Comcast won't agree to that. They'll agree to 4%, but they won't agree to the other part that we need, and that's the $694,000.
Why wouldn't Verizon have to do the same if Comcast agreed to that, the capital and the subscription per month at 4 or 5%, then wouldn't Verizon have to meet the same?
They don't have a level playing field trigger. They don't have a trigger in the capital part of their license the way they do in their annual operation grant part of the license.
I got you.
So they've only agreed to increase the gross annual revenue percentage to a higher number if we get it from somebody else, but not the capital.
Gotcha, okay.
And then I think the intent was the cost of negotiating 2 licenses, we do it once and, save that part of it.
Yeah, but there's not, I think you could look at that and say that, not sure, you're still negotiating two contracts. Bill's still gonna bill us for two contracts, you know. It's the same. I don't see the advantage there necessarily. But the savings, I don't see the savings.
So Bill, what's the next step, given all this conversation?
The next step is for me to see, for me or the committee to meet with Comcast and say, all right, Comcast, you have suggested 3-year level, a 10-year license with the first 3 years level funded, and then we'll negotiate a higher amount in year 4, and you're not worried then about level playing field. And they've said that. They said they won't worry about whether we ultimately get Verizon to agree to that or not 3 years down the line. So the question is, Comcast, will you give us 4%? After 3 years, will you give us 4%, and in 3 years' time, will you give us $694,000 in capital? And that's what we need. And if Comcast is not willing to meet that capital demand, then we're back to, well, do we just issue a 3-year license and wait, or what? How do we handle that? And probably we will end up having to handle it by issuing a 3-year license and waiting. But the next step is to see whether we can get Comcast to agree to our $694 in 3 years' time. If we do that, it's not everything we wanted, but it's at least a partial victory.
So let me understand this, Bill. If they've already said they're not going to do a 3-year license, do we just kind of go month by month until we get to that time where the Verizon one is up?
Well, I think we have to do something. I think we have to issue them a 3-year license at the same amount that we've got now and send it to them. Or I think we have to try to negotiate a license where 3 years are level funded and we get an increase in capital and in the annual operating grant, either upfront or beginning 3 years. I think we have to do something. We can't go month to month. We can't not do anything if we're not negotiating for renewal.
Yeah, I was just curious whether there was a legal time limit of going month to month. You know, if they're not going to go to the 3 and our wish is a 3 and they say pound sand Danvers, you know, do we just continue to go? That was the basis for my question.
Yeah.
And obviously, Mr. Chairman, we've got a situation where we have to make sure that DCAT is going to survive the 3 years. You know, and the service that they're providing is not going to be cut way back.
Right. So I think what we do, and I don't necessarily think we need a motion at this point in time, but I think, Bill, we let you take the next step and see what the response is, and then we as a committee percolate on that and then await your answer in terms of what you proposed, and then provide direction after that.
I agree. That's okay, but can I ask why can we at least in our negotiations seek the 4% that we're getting, that we've got from Verizon?
The answer is I certainly will ask for it. And it may not be problematic because there is a provision in the Verizon license that says they'll match it. So Comcast may be willing to do that. It's possible.
Something.
And I'll certainly ask. Obviously, that's, you know, if it's provided for in the Verizon license, then that's a decent ask.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just like to see if Chad has any more comment. I would be interested to hear.
Where did Greg go? I don't have my glasses on.
He's up.
Yeah, I'm over here.
Oh, there you are, sorry.
If I may.
So I can't see a thing.
So I guess I have, the first question is just about the motion from the last meeting about the target. From what I remember, and you may have the notes in front of you, the goal was 4% for a 3-year contract with a 15% increase in capital. So if I'm hearing correctly, Bill, the sticking point seems to be capital. If we were to need to level fund capital for the next 3 years to get 4% for operating, I think that's a better deal for the town in terms of meeting their cable obligate, or what the town determined is the full scope of cable services that they're looking for. The other question I would have would be the restrictions on the 4% money. To my understanding, there would be nothing that would restrict the town from spending some of that 4% towards capital purchases. And in terms of total dollars, the increase from 3 to 4% is substantially more than the increase of 15% on 39,800 over the course of the 3 years. So if it were to be possible to get the 4% in level fund capital, it would be a much better deal for the town, and I think that you would get much more return on your investment than you would kicking the can down the road another 3 years. Simply in 3 years, looking at the cable subscriber rates, DCAT will not look like it does now in 3 years, level funded at 3%. It's just, there's no way to match our operating increases that are necessary, things like health insurance, rent, all those kinds of things, while also maintaining the level services that you're expecting. It's just, the math doesn't work. So I would contend, from the perspective of DCAT, if you're looking to get the most return on your investment, it would be to increase to 4%, and if you have to kick the can down the road on something, it would be capital. I think that there's ways to meet the capital needs going forward, especially in the next 3 years, and really revisit that at the next contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just respond?
Sure.
I think Greg is correct that there isn't anything that prevents us from taking money from our fund that was paid under the 4% and instead spending it on a capital expense rather than an operating expense. That limitation doesn't exist, so that's completely possible.
That's what I think that's what we strongly got to do, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think, Bill, I think that's the intent and the direction from the board to go do that, and we'll await your feedback once you've spoken to them about that.
And I understand, and we'll speak with them as soon as possible, and I'll let Jen know,
Thank you.
and all of you. Understood.
Crazy business.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'll ask the board if there's any further questions for Bill or for Greg. Anybody have any?
Thank you for explaining it, Bill.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry to be the bearer of discouraging news, but it's the world we live in.
Yeah.
We'll see what kind of a deal we can strike up with Comcast, and we'll let you know. Good evening, all, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
I have,
You're welcome.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's necessary for Bill to catch this, but just in terms of back of the envelope math for the committee, if you're looking at a 1% increase in franchise fees, it's projected around $100,000 a year additional coming in. And then when you're looking at 15% of capital, 15% of 39,800 is obviously substantially less. So in terms of what would be coming in, that 3% to 4% jump is far more substantial in total dollars. Thank you.
I believe that the committee was on page 11 of the business plan. You'll see some, at the top of the page, under the analysis of funding options, you'll see numbers in red, and that first one comes out to about 117 and change, and that is the license fees if no change is made to the deficit. And the difference in the Comcast capital is $6,776
On the capital side.
on the capital side.
Yep.
So Greg's back of the envelope math is pretty accurate.
Yeah, like I said, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I think it's important to try to get that 4% if we can. Help DCAT keep going at the best we can, and then we can still do the same thing. The goals stay the same as far as uniting the terms of the contracts.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm fine with that. I think we're at the whim of what's going on at the negotiation
Oh,
table.
and
right
I'm
now.
sorry, and that's the other thing I want to say, is we as a committee were concerned, when we didn't, there's some places, some communities are getting 5%.
Right.
Some are getting 2.9. We felt comfortable asking our residents to pay the 4%, and I think we're still in that position.
Right. Yeah, we've been very consistent on that point.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Hearing no further questions, we'll move on to the next topic. Item 3 on our agenda, the approval of minutes from April 8th. We're having technical difficulties with them, so I'll defer that line item till our next meeting. Okay, and we'll approve them then. And then item number 4, any new or old business before the committee that any of the members would like to bring up? Bill, anything from you? Steve, anything from you?
No.
Okay, I have nothing. I've asked a lot of questions of Bill earlier, so great time management. It's 5:59, so I'll entertain a motion to end our regular meeting, and we'll begin our open forum thereafter at 6.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting closed. Thank you.
And we're gonna go right into the public hearing.
Okay.
Correct.
Cable all set with cameras, et cetera? We're good to go? I've got 6 o'clock. Greg, you good? Good evening. It's 6 p.m., and as advertised in the Salem News on April 14th and 21st, we are opening the public hearing concerning the Comcast cable license and the proposed renewal of its non-exclusive cable license, which is due to expire in April 2021. Members of the public from Danvers were encouraged to testify at this hearing concerning the performance of Comcast and local cable needs in renewing licenses for the town of Danvers. This hearing is held pursuant to Chapter 207, CMR 3.0 and 4.7 of the United States Code 546 as a public proceeding to identify the needs of every town. Public records pertaining to the renewal will be available for inspection and copying at the Town Hall Town Manager's Office. This hearing is being conducted by the Cable Advisory Committee as designated by the Select Board in their capacity as cable license issuing authorities for the town in respect to a license for the town, and for the purpose of ascertainment of local cable needs for the town. So at this point in time, I'd like to hand it over to Greg for any public commentary as our DCAT General Manager.
Hello, everybody. So let me just turn on my computer really quick and get the presentation all set. A lot of this will be a review, but I've noticed over the past year or so, we have a lot of new viewers, so if you're watching this and you don't know who we are, this is your opportunity. There's my phone.
It's a boy.
I had it loaded up. Let me just pull it. Excuse me one moment. All right, thank you. So, first question, who is DCAT? So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We provide PEG access services to the town of Danvers. PEG is Public Education and Government Access. We have a 9-member board of directors. We have 4 full-time staff, multiple part-time, and we're funded primarily through franchise fees, as you are all quite familiar with on this board. We've been a provider of PEG services in Danvers since 2001. You can find us currently on Verizon channels 36, 37, 41, as well as Comcast 99, 8, and 22. So this is our operating structure at the moment. So you can see the board of directors oversees the executive director, who's myself. We have an underwriting coordinator who helps bring in fundraising income as well as does PR, communications, promotions, those sort of things. An operations manager and an access and government and education coordinator as well as videographers. So DCAT operates and manages equipment at multiple locations. The first is our studio at 87 Elm Street. We also have on-site video at Town Hall in the Toomey Room. We have equipment at the high school auditorium that we just upgraded to HD last year as part of one of our capital projects. The school committee meeting room, which is adjacent to or across the hall from the auditorium, where they would be meeting in non-COVID times. The Danvers Senior Center, which the build-out is happening as we speak. It's just about done. I was over there today, and it looks great. It's going to be a great opportunity for more programming out of the senior center to be covered, as well as a potential other meeting place for town boards. It'll be wired up, 3 HD cameras, new sound system. It's really great. And then around us at Holton Richmond Middle School, you can see the setup that we've put together over the last 6 months or so during COVID. In addition to that, we also maintain field production and post-production equipment for members to use, as well as the general public. So programming, last fiscal year, which ended June 30th, 2020, we played 2,060 hours of new original programming. 1,646 hours were public, so member-produced or community events. 160 hours of education and 254 hours of government programming. So I'd like to break this up, sort of P, E, and G. That's really what we do. So public. That's the program that you cannot get anywhere else. Channel 5 is not going to cover the things in town that DCAT does. So your local sports games, community events, any library lectures, things downtown, anything going on, a free speech platform for the people of Danvers to come in and share their opinions professionally. We help them along the way, get their voice out there. Really, at this point, if it's happening in Danvers, it's happening on DCAT. You can catch up with anything happening. You can get to know your town even better. If you're new to town, I highly recommend you tune in a few times a week for the next month. You'll know everything you need to know about Danvers. So far this year, we've actually covered 68 sports games, which is impressive because sports took a little while to kick off. And that is more than we did last year already. We still have another season to go. We provide training for members, and we have equipment available for checkout as well as training. So we give people state-of-the-art training on equipment so they can produce their programming, get their ideas out professionally to as wide of an audience as possible. We've also worked with 78 nonprofit organizations in Danvers in the last fiscal year, which is impressive for 2 reasons. First, I'm impressed with us. We're able to do all that work. And second, I'm impressed that there's 78 nonprofit organizations in Danvers. So there's a lot going on, and we really help build their capacity. A lot of these organizations just don't have the funding to do these sorts of things, to get their word out there, and this is where DCAT fits in and helps them achieve their mission. Educational access. So we provide a lot of educational opportunities for students, and a lot of it for free. We recently changed our membership structure, so student membership is free. We offer free classes at the elementary and middle school. This was last year when we had 161 participants. This year is different, obviously, with COVID. Internship and enrichment opportunities for high school and college students. We had 6 internships last year. We also do youth programming with the YMCA and the Danvers Rec Department. So a huge part of what we do is education, but it's also a huge thing that we haven't been able to do the way we would do in the past this year due to COVID. So we've picked up a lot of things on the government side, and the challenge for us is going to be to continue the educational programming that we're used to while also continuing the government programming that we picked up in the last year. That will be especially challenging if we maintain our current funding level. So for Danvers Public Schools, we also help with professional development, any school initiatives. So we do welcome videos. At times we introduce new principals when they come in. All sorts of the little things that make parents and students more aware of what's going on in their schools, and anything school pride. So it's a good opportunity for kids to be excited about where they go to school and what they're doing. Government access, I included 2 pictures here. This is a tale of 2 years. On the bottom left, you'll see what it used to look like when we broadcast out of the Toomey room, and on the right, that is our setup for remote meetings. So that picture was actually taken on a night when we were doing 3 meetings at the same time on all 3 of our channels. So we have it set up that we can do remote meetings. We can do hybrid meetings, as you just saw, where we can bring people in who are not here, and that's the kind of capacity we want to keep going forward. We want to help the town of Danvers and the government of Danvers be as transparent as possible, involve people, and really just be there for the town. So we have programming from town departments, and we also have a lot of announcements via bulletin board and social media. We do election coverage. We just did 2 candidate forums for the school committee and the select board races. We try to just open things up for the town. Not everyone has time to do all these, to come to things and to really tune in. So for us, we try to make it available on demand so the citizens of Danvers can be as informed as possible. Membership, we have 198 active members as of right now. We We do training with them, train them on equipment, give them airtime in an equitable fashion, and it's really just a way for people to get their voices out there. The kind of training you get at DCAT and the kind of professional video you can create is a lot different than just turning on your cell phone and putting it on selfie view. There's a lot more to it, and if you want to get your voice out there and be taken seriously, we can help you do that. And this is one I just wanted to put on. This is a chart of our YouTube viewership growth over the last 3 years, or 4 years rather. We switched over to YouTube as our main video on demand platform in 2018, and as you can see, it's really grown quite a bit. We're gonna probably hit 100,000 views this year. And the thing for us that I think separates us from some of the other stations that you'll see that get a lot of views is it's really driven by local content. Our most watched shows on our YouTube channel are school committee meetings, they're select board meetings, they're candidate forums. These aren't just videos that happen to pick up a lot of views. These are things that are really informing the people of Danvers. So for the future, what we would like to do is obviously to continue to provide the services we currently have. We're looking to build out our capacity for government and education access. The challenge that we're facing in the near term is as things start to open up and we've really built out our government capacity and government programming, is how do we maintain the educational programs for students given the resources that we currently have. It will be a challenge at our current funding level to do all the things that we want to do for the town. We're also looking to grow our member base and community partnerships. We have a fair amount of members, but we always want more. We always want people to come on, so if you're watching out there in TV land, please give us a call, reach out. We'll be happy to help you get your voice out there and be heard. And then just continue to have state-of-the-art tools. Keep our technology up to speed, put programming where people can see it, have it be high quality so they can tune in, hear it, see it, and know what's going on and be informed. So ultimately for us, we want to help Danvers have their voice heard, and we want to be there for the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. The chair will now ask if there's any comment from any of the board members. Bill?
Great presentation, and the letters that Greg didn't refer to that were included in our packet, the support letters from the community are very, very impressive and exactly what we thought when you think about what DCAT means to the community. So, heartfelt, thank you.
Steve, any comment from your end?
No, almost set, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great presentation. As I was watching this, it reminds me, 49 years ago, I was in this building as part of Bill Clark's AV Club, and we were taking reels of tape and threading it through a machine, and I remember him telling me, hey, Coley, someday they're gonna have this in a cassette. And now you take a look at where the technology's gone. The chair will also mention that I did read the letters this afternoon and very impressed with the breadth of services across the, for-profit, nonprofit, and other charitable organizations in town, and you've done a great job, and I'm glad to see it's well respected by the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Our liaison to the select board, David Mills, do you have any comment?
Just as looked through was beautifully presented, and I was intimidated as to whether or not I'd be able to understand what was going on tonight. And it was very well presented, and I'm not surprised that the DCAT presentation was the high quality that it is, because I do watch it on the full on activities for the years, and I hope we can continue to support that. And more, if that's something that they need. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, David. All right, at this part of the program, I entertain comments from the community. Anybody that would like to speak, feel free to do so. My ask is that you approach the podium and identify yourself, and please feel free to avail yourselves of that. Yes, Mark.
I guess I'm the only one. Thank you for allowing me to speak, but in support of DCAT and the cable stations that we carry on DCAT, it has been a crazy 18 months or 15 months. that has happened, and the only reason our general public are informed is through the televising of the meetings, the appropriate timeframes that have been allowed, and our crew and our organization, and the organization of DCAD has been very supportive of getting the information out to the general public. So I want to appreciate that, and I want to thank you guys for that. The one thing that I would suggest, and listening to your dissertation that was presented by our attorney, is I put in our letter from the topics of the town news is that we have squandered the opportunity for getting the 5% from Verizon at the time. Now it appears that Verizon and now Comcast is holding the cards. One thing that I wanted to ask while Bill was on the screen is we have made a proposal, but the one thing I didn't hear is, was there a counter from Comcast? And all I heard was that the answer was no. But that's not negotiations. So we need to stand firm on what's required to maintain this process that we're established. And we have a organization that has been very, very supportive to anyone in town. The only thing is they won't let me into the studio except on certain locations or occasions. But I have, been a heavy user of their services, and I appreciate all of that. But the thing is, we need to stand firm, and we need to get a counter from Comcast. The answer is no, then we walk away. That's not negotiations. So we need to present that back to our attorney, to our counsel, and make sure that he presses the issue, because this is a repeat of what happened 3 years ago by Verizon. Verizon said no, and we capitulated. So now we need to stand firm, because I don't know what the revenue is that Comcast reaps from having the service in our town. I don't even remember now the Verizon piece. I mean, there's a lot of money involved in this. And the thing is that the fees or the contribution that we get from the 5% or 3% now is really built into the tax that every one of our users are paying in their bill. So let's not give up the situation here, because our residents are being billed for every penny that we get, and it's being raised by taxes and by fees. I mean, there's a list of all kinds of fees at the end of the bill. So I would respectfully request that you stand firm on the 5%, and let's not, there is no response. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but I want to reassure you that the organization that's functioning currently has done very well for the residents and the producers like myself. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else in the room like to speak or approach the microphone? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to close the public forum on the renewal of the Comcast license.
So moved.
All in favor? Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Good evening, Danvers. Stay safe and mask